Last episode, we talked about the conflict between the righteous Wolcadians and the perfidious Anglos and their American descendants. Today, we shall introduce you to a completely new topic. Ethanopiana! Its glorious history and struggles, fighting for sovereignty and self-reliance against the powers of imperialism, at least in their narrative. Now, you all know the drill. Don't forget to take a look at both my Nation RP server and Micah History server, his channel, my main channel, all that stuff. And continue the comment section for only discussion promoting blasphemy against the Lord shall be taken down. Alright, so this is usually the point where I would mention something like, now, on with the video, but a couple updates right now, just two. The first one is rather simple. No video on my main channel next Tuesday. No video on this channel next Wednesday. Reason being, I have two mega projects that I want to upload, and I want to upload them as one video. I want to make the one video be a very long video. I want to have it a massive live stream premiere party shit. It'll last for multiple hours, hopefully, God willing. Now, number two is this. Emily Calderon, Public Affairs Assistant of the Ethanopiana Ministry of Civic Affairs, has released an email, has sent me an email. Dear Wolvers Ministries, I hope this email finds you well. My name is Emily Calderon, and I'm a Public Affairs Assistant of the Ethanopiana Ministry of Civic Affairs. She basically went on this gigantic spiel about how I, as a content creator, must be a responsible content creator in the promotion of democratic norms. I will not be allowed, I will not be allowed to send stuff from the Wolcadian perspective. In fact, I had to send her and the Ethanopian government a whole apology notice. Those videos have not been taken down by the major governmental officials in minority. They remain strong. They will last for a long while. But at the same time, I very much got a talking to from them. And because of that, I must deliver this information in an accurate and responsible manner, promoting democratic values and opposing the authoritarian regime in Wolcadia. Thank you, and on with the video. The Federal Socialist Republic of Ethanopiana is quite a very unique nation. The capital is minority. The major cities consist of New Vladivostok, Clara, Osprey. The national ideology is socialism with Ethanopianan characteristics. The national religion is secular, but it has a state policy of laïcité. The dominant religions are Orthodoxy, the Old Faith of Thorax Faith, Catholicism, and indigenous beliefs. The official language is trilingual between Russian, English, and Wolcadian, though indigenous Ethanopianan languages remain. As of recent, this is true. The Ethanopianan government did stop Wolcadian from being a trilingual, one of the official languages in Ethanopiana's trilingual society. Reason being, simply because Wolcadia is not necessarily the friendliest nation to Ethanopiana. Their imperialists are occupying some Ethanopianan land. I'll tell you about that later. The president is Charles Osawanch, the chancellor is Stefan Mihailovich, the ruling party is the United Front, the secondary parties are the Democratic Socialist Party, National Congress, Classical Liberal Party, and Communist Party of Ethanopiana. The upper chamber is the Senate, the middle chamber is the House of Delegates, the lower chamber is the House of Representatives, and the nation itself is a socialist federal republic. Now, the regions and physical geography of Ethanopiana are quite interesting. It is a small island nation situated in the Bering Strait between Wolcadian Alaska and Russian Chukotka. Despite its Arctic location, Ethanopiana is known for its relatively mild climate, with temperatures rarely exceeding 80 degrees Fahrenheit or going lower than -10 degrees. This climate is largely independent of seasonal variation, with most temperatures going from 50 to 70 degrees, with the occasional cold spell every once in a while, where they drop down to 30, 20, or even 0 degrees. Beyond this, there are occasional what's called beige miles. These beige miles are incredibly tiny regions in which tropical features are found along the Arctic coast. These beige miles are the only places on Earth where one can sip a pina colada on a tropical beach while looking at the midnight sun or the aurora borealis. Imagine that. While Ethanopiana has 9 provinces, it is best to look at the nation in terms of 4 major regions, each with their own culture and lore. The plains of Yegerov in the west contain land descended from Russian settlers. It is known for its Russian architecture, culture, and slightly Russian climate. As cold spells occur more often, are generally a bit colder, and the climate is a bit cooler. This region is also home to a more conservative members of Ethanopianan society. The Chanhayan Mountains are a tall mountain range splitting the island in half. Originally perceived as a no man's land, the indigenous people of Ethanopiana have established a foothold in the region and operate with autonomy. Its capital city, Clara, was built on the ruins of a former Wolcadian outpost, which turned into a Russian outpost, essentially marking the fall of colonial rule over Ethanopiana. The Noorvale Prairies dominate Ethanopiana's east, containing the cities of Minority, Chestnut, and Osprey. This region was culturally influenced by the British, specifically through Canadian settlers. It is also the technological capital of Ethanopiana and its most developed region, home to the capital city of Minority, a hallmark of trade and a legacy of the revolution, which there are many, but this is just the revolution in general. The southern corridors, however, are rather tragic. They are occupied by insidious hands of Imperial Wolcadia. Most people within this region are generally the descendants of Wolcadian settlers. They need to get off Ethanopianan territory or assimilate to a broader Ethanopianan identity. Although Wolcadian propagandists will tell you that the Ethanopianan government wants to eliminate this population, reality paints a picture rather unflattering to the authoritarian Wolcadians. These territories are inherently Ethanopianan by nature. Their history is Ethanopianan. Their land is Ethanopianan. The Wolcadian colonizers came and stole this land. And essentially, these people who are still there, they need to recognize that. They need to recognize all that they have done. The Ethanopianan government is not telling them to get off their land. It is rather telling them that they can remain here, but they should recognize the historical crimes of their ancestors and their imperialist legacy of colonialism and oppression. Something completely antithetical to Ethanopiana's modern democratic principles. Now, let us speak of Ethanopiana's national iconography. The flag of Ethanopiana represents unity over division. The 9 stripes represent both the 9 revolutionary principles and the 9 provinces of rightful Ethanopianan land, while the blue circle represents the presidential sphere, a completely circular building designed for the Ethanopianan president, constructed by British neoclassical architects. Bit of a fun fact, the presidential sphere itself exists within a beige mile in the north of Minority. The presidential sphere also contradicts previous royal symbols over Ethanopiana of not only various native feudal lords that oppressed the population, but foreign imperialists. These banners containing symbols of diamonds rather than the sphere, which is, clearly a better symbol for unity. The laurel and star represent unification from the former Ethanopianan Socialist Republic and the Federal Republic of Ethanopiana, combining symbols from both nations to fit a new identity. You might notice similarities with the flag of the United States, and that is no mere coincidence. We in Ethanopiana have always admired the United States as a symbol of democracy, capable of bringing it into the future. By it, I mean the Ethanopianan Revolution and the Ethanopianan government. Yeah, it's currently autocratic, but it has the ultimate aspiration of transforming into a social democracy. Charles Osawanch, the current president, has unified a nation under a unique socialist identity and is ultimately working on ensuring the capability of a democratic transition. However, as Ethanopiana is a developing country fighting against the threat of Wolcadian imperialism, strong leadership is needed to ensure a bright future. For this reason, Charles Osawanch is Ethanopiana's last dictator, establishing 9 revolutionary principles which are inherently vague simply because they're designed to be reinterpreted over and over again. These principles are: 1. Popular sovereignty under the rule of law. The nation is governed by majority rule, but it must protect minority rights. 2. Triumph of progress over superstition. Progress is an inherent virtue. A commitment to scientific principles must overshadow religious superstition. 3. Unity in diversity and rejection of absolutes. Imperialism is evil because no culture is objectively better or worse than any other. except those that are authoritarian or imperialist. 4. Collective progress through social justice. Social equity is the goal of our nation, and everyone has a part to play in making that happen. 5. Protection of inalienable rights. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of press are embedded within the framework of our nations. 6. Accountability and responsibility. The 5th principle does not include misinformation or hate speech, especially when it comes against our democracy. 7. International solidarity and the spread of democracy. The advancement of democracy is non-negotiable. We must cooperate with any nation that wants to support us in our mission to eliminate the last bastion of conservatism and authoritarianism. 8. Spread of egalitarianism. True democracy means a commitment to equity. Any racial, religious, or gender difference is a form of authoritarianism. 9. Non-negotiability of well-rounded progress. The institution of democracy must be spread, ideally with diplomacy, but by the sword, if necessary. These principles help build a diverse nation committed to our democratic principles. Let us begin our talk about Ethanopiana's history. We will soon compare it to the history of Wolcadia. The modern island of Ethanopiana, known indigenously as Nori-Ulan, has a complex and detailed past that has been largely lost to the ruins of time. Within various archaeological sites, one could see the ruins of a civilization dating back to the Bronze Age, or perhaps even before. Though there's no way to tell what this civilization was like, as their language remains undeciphered, and their ruins remain sporadic. Thus, the now indigenous people of the island, mostly related to the Inuits, Ainu, and Polynesian natives, are the earliest in time we can reliably trace Ethanopianan history back to. In the 1300s, expeditions from the Kingdom of Govarisha to the south of our island established various outposts to trade with the indigenous population. Upon Govarisha's absorption into the Wolcadian Empire, these outposts were transitioned into Wolcadian rule and treated as a center for those perceived as heretics by the dominant religious elite. However, even those who went along with the dominant Thracian religion and did not have any beliefs perceived as heretical worked to colonize this island, taking advantage of the mild climate to establish centers of trade and farming. The gentle climate of Ethanopiana also set a western boundary for Wolcadian colonization, as Wolcadian and Govari expeditions into places like Kamchatka and Chukotka never ended well. This also complemented internal issues within Wolcadia, ensuring that the empire would always have its limits. This allowed the indigenous people of Ethanopiana the chance to establish their own national identities, leading to one of the more visionary leaders cementing her place in Ethanopianan history. This leader, named Kharia, is today a revolutionary figure for her efforts to oppose Wolcadian settler colonialism in the island. Her name today is Clara. But alas, she failed. Her words of progress and freedom rang throughout her island, but they ultimately proved futile against the Wolcadians and their powerful muskets. For this reason, the Ethanopiana nation today has a commitment to technological growth, making sure never to fall behind our opponents ever again. However, just because Haria lost doesn't mean that the Wolcadians won, as Ethanopiana had a few territories left unsullied by the might of Wolcadian imperialism. For a while, their fate was calm and good as the island's indigenous people remained sovereign, establishing peaceful trading relationships with the Wolcadian colonizers. Now, in regards to Haria, today she is not called that. In modern Ethanopiana, most people call her by the name Clara, which is an Anglification of her name. There today is a major debate as to whether we should call her by her English name or by Haria, as imperialism and colonialism being spread in Wolcadia and basically throughout the world kind of makes it a point for Ethanopianans to turn back to the traditional name. But the ideal of progress and conforming to English language rules would want her to be called Clara. Most people pronounce her in whatever the way they want. Now, in the First Ethanopianan Republic, well, let's talk about how that was formed. The peace secured by the loss of Haria and the resilience of natives, the indigenous population afterwards, did not last forever. Merely 100 years after Haria's death, the forces of the Russian Empire conquered the island, and later Alaska. Everyone in Ethanopiana, whether Wolcadian, indigenous, or even Russian, chafed under the Tsar's authoritarian rule. The Tsar conquered the island to gain slaves for his empire, and he succeeded. Russian nobles kept our people in line by whatever means necessary, committing massacre after massacre until the Ethanopianan people had enough and decided to revolt. The revolution was the first of many, shaping our nation's history and future as a nation founded on democratic principles. A new capital was built on the ruins of the old Russian fort of Kostrosisk, named minority after the revolutionaries who remained alive in the war, to serve as a chilling legacy, reminding everyone of the steep price of democratic institutions. A new republic was proclaimed in a manner similar to that of the American Revolution, though its authoritarian nature got the better of it. The Taja people, descendants of the original 7 tribes, were in favor of a centralized republic, while other indigenous groups and the descendants of Wolcadian colonizers wished for a more federal regime that would broadly represent the wishes of all people. Essentially, states' rights. However, states' rights to do what? States' rights to have a theocracy. States' rights to go against democratic principles. And now, states' rights to challenge a woman's right to choose for reproductive health care access. In the 1840s, the island nation had a civil war between the Unitary Republic of Ethanopiana and the Southern Confederacy, the former representing the wish of the indigenous population for national unity, and the latter representing the wish of the descendants of Wolcadian and Russian colonizers for a more federal republic that wouldn't hold them accountable. Or, as they would say, one that wouldn't come interfering in their own business. This civil war devolved into a warring states period, but eventually ended with a false compromise drafted by Russia, Britain, and Wolcadia that was imposed on the Wolcadian government. Wolcadia took control over southern regions, while the north could remain a unitary republic as long as both Russia and Britain could trade with impunity throughout. This seemed to satisfy all powers except the Ethanopians, as they were kept as a marginal power in a constant cycle that sought to entrap their nation. The Ethanopian Republic would start out as a liberal democracy, be entrapped by British interests that saw their nation poisoned, turning into a corrupt and repressive oligarchy as a result. Then, the nation's people revolted and a genuine liberal democracy was established, but one that the British took firm advantage of, turning again into a corrupt and repressive oligarchy. This pattern of events continued for many, many years. Many years until the start of the Great War. Going on from here, let us talk about World War I. The Ethanopians wanted to remain neutral as they were afraid of being technologically overpowered by the authoritarian Wolcadians who joined the Central Powers. However, when the British offered them financial support and weapons, the Ethanopians had no choice but to agree, joining the war with the promise of national reunification. We fought hard against the Wolcadians and their imperial might, thinking that one day our victory would be assured and that the Wolcadians would have to leave their cities. After all, we had home rule advantage and the Wolcadians were vastly distracted. But that is when we realized exactly how corrupt our government was. The front line broke down. The nation was terrible at war. Impossible for it to win. There's nothing it could do to really do anything. And going on until today, that period is regarded as essentially a period of national humiliation. A Bolshevik revolution occurred as a result, inspired by Vladimir Lenin in Russia. Because of this, and needless to say, the Wolcadians won that war. They maintained all of their colonial territories and allowed us to sort our own problems, though the British and Soviets split us in half. The Soviets established the Socialist Republic of Ethanopiana, a brutal dictatorship declared too inhumane by even Lavrenti Beria, the head of the Soviet secret police. Meanwhile, the East was not much better. Rather than any sort of positive change, all we got was a repetition of the same ineffective and corrupt government that existed before the Socialist Revolution. That was supposed to get us out of this mess. This was all stopped by the man, the myth, the legend, Charles Osawanch himself. He started off as an inspiring entrepreneur, but then he saw exactly how corrupt and exploitative corporations were in his country. For this reason, his business grew, but only to provide funds for political activists and journalists who sought positive change. Eventually, results were manifested when the communist dictator in the West died and the last Soviet troops pulled out of this region, while the Eastern government fell into decay. In these conditions, Osawanch managed to establish a unified Ethanopian nation using the sheer will of the Ethanopian people alone. Now that you know Ethanopiana's history, you can tell why it is an enemy of the authoritarian and imperialist Wolcadians and their dark plans. Wolcadia mythologizes its history, romanticizes the past, and seeks to perpetuate an unjust system of hierarchy and oppression. Ethanopiana, on the other hand, Nations in Pato, on the other hand, they support democracy. They support peace. True peace. Not the type of stuff the Wolcadian imperialists would say, but actual and legitimate peace, in which every nation from Ethanopiana to Russia to even Wolcadia would be a prosperous country. Now, to finish this video, I shall tell you a speech and recite a speech from Charles Osowanch, our president.
People of Ethanopiana, throughout our history, we have always been at the beck and call of foreign empires who thought they could rule over us. Our people today do not remember a time in which we were a fully sovereign nation in control of its destiny. As even as far back as the 1600s, we had to deal with the threat of foreign colonization. We do not remember those days when we could tell the United Kingdom, Russian Empire, and Wolcadia to leave our land alone and handle their own issues. However, these days begin now. Ethanopiana shall establish what the Founding Fathers wanted: a democratic regime built on the principles of fighting foreign empires that wish to see us dead. Our primary goal is a simple one. We have united the socialist West and democratic East, but we must reclaim our island. We must commit to full independence, not just our current territory, but the full territory of what Ethanopiana was meant to be. This will not only take months, but years, decades, and perhaps centuries. But we will see the troops of Ethanopiana and liberators cross into the gates of Tartan and force the imperialists into a retreat so humiliating it will undo all the damage done to our national prestige. Look at the night sky and witness the stars above, and you will see little empires dancing about. You may think that they are eternal, but if you view the world through a scientific lens, you'll realize the fate of their glory. All stars above are petty fools thinking they won't come into a supernova until they grow so bloated or massive that they cannot survive on their own. However, when their stars go into supernovas and become nothing but glistening white dwarfs, we will know exactly the fate of empires. Long live Ethanopiana and Omni Super Una!